She never loved you like she loved your brother. That's what my father announced. At my mother's funeral. In front of the entire church. While I sat frozen in the front pew, clutching the edge of her casket like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. Then he looked me dead in the eye and added, "You were her burden." I nearly collapsed. But while he smirked and soaked up sympathy, I found something he'd missed. The corner of a letter. In her handwriting. With my name. He thought her silence was permanent. He had no idea what she left behind. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Claire Ellison, and I'm 34 years old. I spend most evenings alone in my Portland apartment, working late on marketing presentations, while my engagement ring gathers dust in a drawer. My father, Harold, a retired high school principal, has always viewed me as a disappointment compared to my successful younger brother, Mason. Only my mother, Elaine, truly saw me. Her gentle smile and piano lessons were my sanctuary growing up. When the call came about Mom's heart attack, my hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the phone. Now, staring at my packed suitcase, I remember how she'd squeeze my shoulder during Dad's lectures, her warmth a silent shield against his cold judgment. My mother knew things about him that she never said aloud, secrets held close like the pressed flowers in her Bible. But let me start from the beginning. The flight home felt like drifting through someone else's dream. I kept expecting to wake up, to hear Mom's voice on the phone telling me everything was fine. But reality hit hard when I pulled into our old neighborhood in Dad's church-clothes perfect suburban paradise. Every manicured lawn and pristine mailbox screamed his influence as deacon and retired principal. The autumn leaves didn't dare scatter messily here. Our house looked exactly as it had 20 years ago. Green shutters, white trim, brass knocker polished to a mirror shine. Dad's obsession with appearances hadn't dimmed. You know those homes that feel frozen in time? This was worse, like a museum display of what family should look like, according to Harold Ellison's gospel. I hadn't even reached the front door when Mason's SUV pulled up. My younger brother emerged in an expensive suit, his wife Jessica trailing behind with their 2 kids. He barely nodded in my direction. "Claire." His greeting landed like ice. Dad's inside. The house smelled of lemon furniture polish and Mom's favorite lavender sachets, a combination that suddenly made my throat tight. Every surface gleamed with Dad's stress cleaning. Family photos lined the walls, carefully curated to show our perfect moments. Mason's football victories, Dad's deacon ceremonies, Mom's choir solos. The few pictures including me were mostly group shots where I stood slightly apart, never quite fitting the frame. Remember how grandparents' houses always had that particular kind of silence? This was different. A suffocating quiet that made every footstep echo like an accusation. Dad appeared from the kitchen, ramrod straight in his black suit. The lines around his mouth seemed deeper, but his eyes were dry. "You're late," he said. No hug, no acknowledgement of my red-rimmed eyes, or the overnight bag still clutched in my hand. "The funeral starts in 2 hours. Your room is as you left it." My old bedroom felt like a time capsule of teenage desperation to please him. Academic awards, certificates of merit, piano competition trophies, all arranged with precision that spoke more of Dad's hands than mine. The floral bedspread still bore the coffee stain from my college acceptance celebration. Mom had laughed it off. Dad made me scrub for hours. The church filled quickly. Mom had touched many lives as choir director and community volunteer. I sat in the front pew between Mason and an empty space where Mom should have been. Her casket, draped in white roses, blurred through my tears. The pastor spoke of her gentle spirit, her musical gifts, her devotion to family. Each word felt like a stone in my chest. Then it happened. Dad stood suddenly, cutting through the eulogy. The pastor faltered mid-sentence. The organ note died in a wheezing gasp. Every head turned as Dad's voice filled the chapel. "She never loved you like she loved your brother." He was looking directly at me, his words precise and practiced. The church air turned to glass, sharp, brittle, dangerous. Someone gasped. A hymnal dropped with a hollow thud. My hands went numb. The pew seemed to tilt beneath me as faces turned, expressions ranging from shock to pity to, God help me, curiosity. Mason's smirk burned in my peripheral vision. Jessica whispered something behind her hand to the woman next to her. I stared at Mom's casket, at the roses she would have thought too formal. She loved wildflowers, used to press them between her sheet music. The memory of her humming while arranging daisies in the kitchen crashed against Dad's words, creating a discord that made me physically ill. The pastor cleared his throat, trying to reclaim control of the service. But Dad had achieved what he wanted. In 12 words, he'd rewritten my entire relationship with Mom, painted over decades of piano lessons and secret garden talks and late-night cookie baking conspiracies. He'd taken her voice when she could no longer defend me. I felt 8 years old again, standing in his office after breaking a window, watching him methodically dismantle my explanation. Except Mom wasn't waiting outside the door this time, ready with a hug and whispered encouragement. She lay silent in her casket while Dad rewrote her heart. The rest of the service passed in a blur of hymns and platitudes. I couldn't look away from the roses, their perfect white petals now seeming artificial. Wrong. Mom would have hated them. She would have wanted her garden flowers, imperfect and real. Like me. The house felt wrong after the funeral. Every creak, every shadow seemed to mock Mom's absence. I wandered the rooms like a ghost while relatives chatted in hushed tones over casseroles they'd brought, food no one would really eat. The artificial brightness of their conversations made my skin crawl. Remember those late-night kitchen talks with your mom as a teenager? The warm milk, the quiet understanding, the way problems seemed smaller under soft yellow light? This wasn't going to be one of those nights. I found Dad in the kitchen after everyone had gone. He stood at the sink, mechanically washing dishes that were already clean. The overhead light was off. Just the dim glow from above the stove caught the silver in his hair, deepened the lines around his mouth. Why did you say that? My voice came out steadier than I felt. At the funeral. Why would you? Because it's true. He didn't turn around, just kept scrubbing at an already spotless plate. You were her burden. The word hit like a slap. Her burden? She spent so much time trying to fix you. He set the plate in the rack with precise movements. Always making excuses for you, covering up your failures. The piano lessons, the therapy sessions, the constant attention. It exhausted her. My throat burned. I thought of Mom at my recitals, beaming from the front row. Of quiet afternoons in her garden, sharing secrets while we pulled weeds. Of her voice, warm and sure, telling me I was perfect exactly as I was. That's not true. No? Now he turned, drying his hands on a dish towel. In the half-light, his features looked carved from stone. Who dropped out of law school after we paid 3 years tuition? Who can't maintain a relationship? Who showed up to her own mother's funeral alone, still playing at being an independent woman while her brother has a real family? Each question landed like a blow. I gripped the counter edge, knuckles white. Mom, never... Your mother protected you from the truth. I won't make the same mistake. He folded the towel with military precision. She chose to carry your weakness. But I'm done pretending. Something snapped inside me. All those years of trying to earn his approval, of measuring myself against his impossible standards, they crystallized into a single sharp moment of clarity. I couldn't breathe in the same room with him anymore. I spun and fled, barely seeing where I was going through the blur of unshed tears. The hallway felt too narrow, the walls too close. My shoulder caught the antique table by the stairs, the one Mom used to keep her sheet music on. The music box toppled. I lunged to catch it, but it hit the floor with a sickening crack. The lid popped open, spilling its tinny melody into the silence. God, Claire. Dad's voice carried from the kitchen. Can't you do anything right? I dropped to my knees, gathering the box with trembling hands. The dark wood was scuffed but not broken. As I turned it over, something white caught my eye. Wedged in the gap where the velvet lining had pulled away from the frame. My heart stopped. The corner of an envelope peeked out, just visible in the dim light. I recognized the delicate slope of the handwriting immediately. Mom's distinctive way of forming my name. Claire. Just that fragment, but unmistakable. The rest of the envelope was gone, torn away. But that single corner, with its whisper of my name in Mom's hand, sent electricity through my fingers. I must have made some sound because Dad's footsteps approached. Quickly, I pushed the music box back onto the table, that torn piece of envelope burning in my palm like a secret. Try not to break anything else, he said from the kitchen doorway. That was your mother's. I stood slowly, legs unsteady. I know exactly whose it was. He couldn't see what I held, my closed fist pressed against my leg, hidden in the shadows. But something in my voice made him pause. For just a moment, I caught a flicker of, Something crossed his face. Uncertainty? Fear? Then his expression hardened again. Go to bed, Claire. It's been a long day. I climbed the stairs without another word. That fragment of envelope clutched tight. Mom had written to me. And someone who had access to this house, who had every reason to keep her words from reaching me, had made sure I never saw it. I barely slept that night, that torn corner of envelope tucked under my pillow like some kind of talisman. You know that feeling when you're sure you've forgotten something important, but can't quite grasp what it is? That's how my mind kept spinning, reaching for memories of Mom in her final weeks. The next morning, I waited until Dad left for his daily coffee run before starting my search. The house felt different in daylight. Less threatening, but somehow more hollow. Mom's touches were everywhere. The lavender sachets in the linen closet, her reading glasses still perched on the kitchen windowsill. The familiar scent of her rose hand cream lingered in the master bathroom, and for a moment I had to steady myself against the counter. I started with the obvious places: the filing cabinet in Dad's study, Mom's bedside table, the stack of papers on her desk. Nothing. The drawers in her vanity yielded only old receipts and half-empty bottles of perfume. One whiff of her signature scent, jasmine and vanilla, sent me straight back to Sunday afternoons when she'd let me watch her get ready for church. The home office was next. I combed through every folder, even the ones marked tax records and house maintenance. Dad's organizational system was military precise, everything labeled and dated. But there was nothing personal, nothing in Mom's handwriting. Just bills and bank statements. In the living room, I pulled books from shelves, checking between pages, searched behind picture frames, under cushions. The whole time, my heart raced whenever I heard a car pass outside. If Dad came back and found me, the clock struck 10. He'd be home soon. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Aunt Lila's number. I hadn't spoken to her since before Mom died. Dad had always kept her at arm's length from the family. She answered on the third ring. Claire? Sweetheart, I've been thinking about you. Just hearing her voice, so similar to Mom's, made my eyes sting. Aunt Lila, I need to ask you something. Did Mom ever mention writing me a letter before she died? The silence stretched so long I thought we'd lost connection. Then, very quietly, where did you hear about that? I found part of an envelope, just a corner with my name on it, in her handwriting. Did she tell you about it? Another pause. When Lila spoke again, her voice was careful. She mentioned it, yes, about 3 weeks before we lost her. She said there were things you needed to know, things she couldn't say face to face. My fingers tightened on the phone. What happened to it? Your father. Lila's tone hardened slightly. He intercepted it. Elaine was devastated, but she was too weak by then to do anything about it. None of us knew what happened to the actual letter. I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly unsteady. Why didn't anyone tell me? Oh, honey. By the time I found out, she was already... Lila's voice cracked. Harold made it very clear the subject was closed. You know how he is. How he's always been. Yes, I did know. The master of selective truth, keeper of the family narrative, always controlling which stories got told and which stayed buried. Claire? Lila's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. If she left that letter for you, she'd want you to find it. Check her journals. Her journals? The word triggered something. A memory of Mom writing in leather-bound books, always hiding them away when Dad came home. She kept them for years. If there's anything left of her truth in that house, that's where you'll find it. A door slammed in the background on Lila's end. I have to go. But Claire, be careful. Your father? I know, I said. Thanks, Aunt Lila. I ended the call just as I heard the garage door rumbling open. Dad was back. But now I had something concrete to look for, and the confirmation I needed. The letter was real. Mom had written it, and Dad had made it disappear. The question was, where would a controlling man hide something he never wanted found? That evening, after Dad retreated to his study with his customary scotch, I waited until I heard the telltale sound of his TV news program. You know how some memories just stick with you? The way he always turned the volume up 3 notches too loud, as if daring anyone to complain. I slipped into their bedroom, Mom's bedroom now, I supposed, though it felt wrong to think of it that way. The air still held traces of her presence. The stack of library books by her side of the bed, her reading glasses on the nightstand, even that little ceramic dish where she kept her rings while doing dishes. My throat tightened. Focus, Claire. The journals had to be here somewhere. Mom always wrote in bed, I remembered that much. Usually after Dad fell asleep, or early in the morning before he woke. I started with the obvious spots. Under the mattress, behind the headboard, in her bedside drawer. Nothing. The closet was next. I pushed aside hanging clothes, inhaling the lingering scent of her lavender sachets. Remember those? She used to tuck them into every drawer, every storage box. Said they reminded her of her grandmother's garden. The memory hit me so hard I had to pause, steadying myself against the doorframe. At the back of the closet, partially hidden behind a stack of old photo albums, I spotted something that made my heart skip. A pile of yearbooks from her teaching days. Mom had kept every single one. I started lifting them carefully, one by one, trying not to let them scrape against each other. That's when I saw it. The hope chest. Dark wood, brass fittings, intricate carvings along the edges. I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. Mom used to tell me stories about how her grandmother brought it over from Ireland, filled with linens and love letters. But somewhere along the way, it had disappeared from view, just like so many other things in our house. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. It was lighter than I remembered, as if whatever secrets it held didn't weigh much at all. The brass lock gleamed in the dim light, mocking me. Of course it was locked. When had anything in this house ever been simple? I tried the handle anyway. No give. Come on, Mom, I whispered. Help me out here. The next 20 minutes were a blur of frustrated searching. I tried every key I could find. The spare house key in the kitchen drawer, the old key to the garage side door, even the tiny key that opened Mom's jewelry box. None worked. Down the hall, Dad's TV droned on. Some political debate. He'd be glued to it for at least another hour. My eyes landed on Mom's desk, where her old silver letter opener lay in its usual spot. The one Dad gave her for their 20th anniversary. Probably the last thoughtful gift he ever bought her. I picked it up, testing its weight. The edge wasn't sharp exactly, but it was firm. Maybe... I wedged it into the gap between the lid and base, just beside the lock. Held my breath. Pressed down slowly, carefully, trying not to make a sound. The wood creaked once, softly, and I froze. But Dad's TV kept playing, and after a moment, I tried again. This time, something gave. A small pop, barely audible. The lid lifted just enough for me to slip my fingers underneath. Inside, everything smelled of cedar and thyme. Old photographs, dried flowers, a stack of letters tied with faded ribbon. And there, wrapped in dark blue velvet, a bundle about the size of a paperback book. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely untie the velvet's knot. When I finally managed it, the fabric fell away to reveal an envelope. Cream-colored paper, slightly yellowed at the edges. And there, in Mom's distinctive cursive, the way she always wrote my name, with an extra flourish on the C, Claire. A pressed flower was tucked into the seal. Forget-me-not, Mom's favorite. She used to point them out on our walks, tiny blue stars in the grass. Even the smallest things can be perfect, she'd say. I touched the flower gently, afraid it might crumble. The paper felt delicate under my fingers, as if it might dissolve if I held it too tightly. But it was real. The letter was real. After everything, the funeral, Dad's cruel words, the endless searching, here was Mom's truth, waiting for me. Through the wall, I heard Dad's TV program end, the familiar jingle of the evening news starting up. Soon he'd be making his rounds, checking the doors, turning off lights. I had to move fast. I slipped back to my old bedroom, letter clutched against my chest like a wounded bird. The twin bed with its faded floral comforter waited in the corner, exactly where it had been since I was 16. I sat down, the familiar creak of springs providing strange comfort. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal, careful not to damage the forget-me-not. The pages inside were covered in Mom's flowing script, still elegant, but shakier than I remembered. 3 pages, dated just 6 weeks before she died. My dearest Claire, it began. I had to pause, pressing my hand to my mouth. Just seeing those words made my throat tight. The scent of her favorite hand lotion seemed to drift up from the paper. That subtle lavender she always wore. If you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. Your father has shown his true nature, and you're hurting. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have been stronger, should have protected you better. But maybe these words can help make things right. Tears blurred my vision. I blinked them away, determined to read every word clearly. For years, I've watched Harold chip away at your confidence, always so subtle that others couldn't see. The way he'd dismiss your achievements, compare you to Mason, make you doubt yourself. I saw it all, and my silence makes me complicit. But there's so much you don't know, so much I need to tell you before it's too late. The next paragraphs hit like physical blows. Mom described how Dad had slowly isolated her from her friends, always with reasonable-sounding excuses. How he'd canceled her therapy appointments behind her back, claiming scheduling conflicts. How he'd monitored her phone calls and emails, all under the guise of protecting her. But the final straw came last month, she wrote. I found him in the study with papers spread across his desk, legal documents. He was practicing my signature, Claire, over and over. When I confronted him, he claimed it was for a church donation form. But I saw what it really was. My will. I gasped softly, the paper crinkling in my grip. I knew then that I had to act quickly. The cancer's spreading faster than the doctors predicted, and Harold knows it. He's already made changes to the will, cutting you out, leaving everything to himself and Mason. But I've taken steps he doesn't know about. My heart pounded as I read the next lines. There's a man named Carl Brimley, an estate lawyer in town. He's helped me prepare a proper will, one that reflects my true wishes. You'll find his office on Oak Street, above the old pharmacy. Carl has copies of everything, including documentation of Harold's forgeries. He's waiting for you, Claire. He'll help you fight this. A sob escaped me, and I quickly pressed my face into my pillow to muffle it. All these years, I'd thought Mom was passive, accepting. But she'd been playing chess while Dad thought she was playing checkers. You were never my burden, Claire. You were my light, your kindness, your creativity, your gentle heart. These weren't weaknesses, no matter what Harold claimed. They were your inheritance from generations of strong women. My mother, her mother, and now you. The last paragraph was written in slightly shakier script, as if she'd had to rest between sections. I know this letter might not reach you easily. Harold will try to hide it, destroy it, deny its existence. But I've learned a few things about hiding things myself. And I believe in you, sweetheart. You'll find your way to the truth. You always have. I held the pages to my chest, letting silent tears fall. The house creaked around me, settling into night. Somewhere downstairs, Dad was probably congratulating himself on his perfect performance at the funeral, never suspecting that Mom had outmaneuvered him. Carl Brimley. The name echoed in my mind. A real person, with real evidence. Not just my word against Dad's, but actual proof. I carefully folded the letter and slipped it into my jacket's inner pocket, right next to my heart. Tomorrow, I'd find Carl Brimley's office. Tomorrow, I'd start making things right. But tonight, I let myself cry for the mother I'd never fully known until now, the quiet warrior who'd left me a roadmap to justice. The next morning, my hands shook as I dialed Carl Brimley's number. Each ring felt like an eternity. Brimley and Associates, how may I help you? A warm baritone voice answered. Mr. Brimley? This is Claire Ellison. My throat tightened. Elaine Ellison's daughter. A long pause followed. Miss Ellison, I'm so sorry for your loss. His tone was careful, measured. Thank you. I need to speak with you about my mother. She left me a letter mentioning you specifically. Another pause. I see. His voice shifted slightly. And you have this letter with you? Yes. She said you helped her prepare her real will. I gripped the phone tighter. Please, I need your help. Come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. Oak Street, above Miller's Pharmacy. 8 a.m. sharp. Remember those old detective movies where the private eye's office is always up a creaky staircase? Carl Brimley's place was exactly like that. The wooden steps groaned under my feet as I climbed to the second floor the next morning. A frosted glass door with peeling gold letters greeted me. C. Brimley, attorney at law. Inside, the office smelled of leather and old paper, like Mom's favorite bookstore where we used to spend Sunday afternoons. Carl rose from behind his desk. Late 50s, silver-rimmed glasses, tweed jacket with elbow patches. He looked exactly like the kind of man my mother would trust. Miss Ellison. He gestured to a leather chair. Please have a seat. I pulled out Mom's letter, my hand steadier than I expected. She wrote about you protecting her real will. Carl studied the letter carefully, his expression softening as he read. Yes, your mother came to me about 3 months ago. She was concerned about your father's behavior. He forged her will, didn't he? Carl nodded slowly. Elaine suspected he would. She brought me evidence of his attempts to practice her signature. He walked to a large safe in the corner. That's why we prepared this. The document he pulled out was pristine, official-looking. Mom's signature, her real signature, flowed across the bottom. Your mother wanted to ensure you were protected, Carl continued. She knew Harold would try to control things after her death. The will he's planning to present is a forgery. My chest tightened. How can you be sure? Because I have the original right here with verified signatures and proper witnesses. He tapped the document. Your mother was very thorough. Dad's arranged a reading, I said, for the other will. Yes, I know. It's scheduled for Thursday morning. 2 days. My stomach lurched. What do we do? Carl leaned back, fingers steepled. The timing actually works in our favor. Having all interested parties present when we reveal the true will, with proof of the forgery, that's exactly what we need. I thought of Dad's face at the funeral, so confident in his cruelty. He'll fight it. Of course he will. Carl's voice hardened slightly. But your mother left us everything we need. Bank records showing unusual transfers, documents with his practice signatures, even recordings of their conversations where he discussed changing the will without her consent. Mom had thought of everything. Even in her final weeks, she'd been working to protect me. That familiar scent of lavender seemed to float through my memory. Her at her vanity, dabbing perfume on her wrists before heading to church. What's our next step? I asked. For now, we wait. Act normal. Don't let your father suspect anything. Carl carefully returned the will to his safe. Come to the reading on Thursday. Let him start his performance. Then we'll present the truth. I stood, smoothing my skirt. Thank you, Mr. Brimley, for helping her, for keeping this safe. Your mother was a remarkable woman, Miss Ellison. He smiled gently. She knew exactly what she was doing. Walking down those creaky stairs, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Mom died. Hope. Not just hope, certainty. In 2 days, Dad would learn that his perfect performance had one fatal flaw. He'd underestimated Mom, and he'd underestimated me. The drive home from Carl's office felt surreal, like I was floating between 2 worlds, the one where Dad held all the power, and the one where Mom's truth waited to break free. You know that feeling when you're carrying a secret that could change everything? That's what buzzed through me with every turn of the steering wheel. I parked around the corner from the house, not ready to face what waited inside. The autumn air had that crisp edge that Mom used to love, the kind that made her pull out her collection of hand-knit scarves and heat up apple cider on the stovetop. I could almost smell it now, that sweet, spicy scent that meant comfort and safety. When I finally walked in, Dad and Mason's voices drifted from the study, all smug laughter and hushed planning. I slipped past without a word, my footsteps silent on the carpet runner Mom had picked out years ago. Up in my old bedroom, I pulled out Mom's letter again. The paper had already started to soften at the creases from how many times I'd unfolded and refolded it. Her handwriting flowed across the pages, elegant but pressed deep into the paper, like she'd been determined to make every word count. I traced my finger along the last paragraph. The words I'd read so many times they felt carved into my memory. You are my daughter. My favorite piece of music. Mom used to say that when I was little, usually after Dad had been particularly harsh. She'd sit with me at the piano, letting me pick out simple melodies while she hummed along. The house creaked and settled around me as evening crept in. I heard the front door open and close, then Dad's car starting up. Probably heading to another church meeting. He'd been extra visible in the community since Mom died, playing the grieving widower to perfection. Mason's footsteps moved through the house below. His voice carried up through the heating vent. He was on the phone, talking loud like he always did when he thought no one was listening. Yeah. As soon as the will's read on Thursday, I'm moving in. A pause. Dad already promised me the house. We'll clear out all Mom's old junk. Those antiques she was so precious about. They'll fetch a decent price. My stomach clenched. Mom's antiques weren't junk. They were pieces of history she'd carefully collected over decades. Each one had a story. the Victorian writing desk where she'd penned her Christmas cards, the Art Deco vanity mirror that made her feel glamorous on hard days, and her pride and joy, the 1920s Steinway upright piano that had been her grandmother's. The piano alone should bring in 5 figures, Mason continued, chuckling. Some collector will snap that up fast. I pressed my hands against the cool window pane, fighting back tears of rage. Every piece in this house held a piece of Mom's soul, and they were treating it like a garage sale inventory. Thursday can't come soon enough, Mason said. Time to clear out the old and bring in the new. Dad says we can modernize the whole place once it's mine. The call ended, and I heard him whistling as he walked away. Probably the same self-satisfied tune he'd had at the funeral. I pulled Mom's letter close again, my eyes falling on another line I'd almost missed before. The house isn't just walls and windows. It's where our memories live, where your music lives. She was right. This wasn't just about the will or the money. It was about preserving what Mom had built here, the quiet beauty she'd created in spite of Dad's cold control. I had one shot to stop them from erasing her completely. Downstairs, Mason was still moving around, probably already measuring for new furniture in his head. I sat on my childhood bed, Mom's letter in my lap, and let my fury settle into something harder, more focused. Thursday suddenly felt both too far away and too close. You'd think knowing you have the winning hand would make waiting easier. But sitting there, listening to Mason whistle while he planned to dismantle Mom's world, every minute felt like an hour. Still, Mom had waited months to spring her trap. I could wait 2 more days. I smoothed the letter one more time, folded it carefully, and tucked it into my jacket pocket, right above my heart, where Mom's words belonged. Let them plan their renovation. Let them dream about their modernization. They had no idea what Thursday would bring. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of heavy gray clouds that seemed to press against the windows. I sat in my rental car outside the house, watching familiar faces file in through the front door. Dad had invited what felt like half the church, probably wanting witnesses for his moment of triumph. My fingers brushed the letter in my jacket pocket, its edges worn soft from constant handling. Carl's car pulled up behind mine, and I watched him gather his briefcase with careful, deliberate movements. The sight of his silver-rimmed glasses and tweed jacket steadied my racing pulse. "Ready?" he asked as I met him on the sidewalk. I nodded, though my throat felt too tight for words. The weight of Mom's letter seemed to pulse against my ribs with each step toward the house. Inside, the den was already crowded. The antique furniture Mom had loved so much had been pushed against the walls to make room for folding chairs. The air smelled of coffee and that awful pine cleaner Dad insisted on using. Mason lounged near the fireplace, holding court with a few cousins. Dad sat at the head of the dining table like it was a throne, his reading glasses perched precisely on his nose. You know that moment when you walk into a room and everyone turns to stare? This was worse. The conversations died in little ripples as people noticed Carl beside me. Dad's eyes narrowed behind his glasses. "What's he doing here?" Mason straightened from his casual lean. "Claire." Dad's voice carried that familiar note of warning. "The family lawyer is already present. Mr. Brimley's services won't be necessary." I moved to stand directly across from him at the table. My hands weren't shaking anymore. "Actually, I need to speak before we begin. The reading comes first," Dad said firmly. "Then we can—" "No." The word came out sharp and clear, cutting through his authority like a knife through butter. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I'm going to read something first, something Mom wrote." Dad's face tightened. "Whatever you think you have, what I have," I pulled out the letter, "is Mom's voice. Her real voice. Not the one you tried to silence." The paper crackled as I unfolded it. Someone gasped. Probably Aunt Lila, recognizing Mom's distinctive handwriting. I took a deep breath and began to read. "My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. Your father's control, which started as subtle criticism and grew into something much darker, has finally won. But only temporarily. I need you to know the truth. All these years watching him chip away at your confidence, telling you that you weren't enough, it broke my heart. Every time he praised Mason while ignoring your achievements, every time he made you feel small, I should have stood stronger against him. He's been isolating me for months now, canceling my therapy appointments, screening my calls. Even my closest friends have been turned away from our door. Last week, I discovered he's been forging documents, including a new will that erases everything I wanted to leave for you. But I planned for this. Carl Brimley has the real will, the one that reflects my true wishes, the one that ensures you'll have what you need to build your own life, free from your father's influence. You were never my burden, Claire. You were my light. When you played piano, your music filled this house with the joy your father tried so hard to squeeze out of it. You have his strength, but none of his cruelty, and that terrified him. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from him. I'm sorry I let his darkness dim your shine for so long, but you can reclaim it now. My real will, my true wishes, and most importantly, my love for you. These are your inheritance. Use them to build the life you deserve. All my love, Mom. The silence in the room felt absolute. Dad's face had gone slack, his carefully maintained mask cracking at the edges. Mason wasn't smirking anymore. Carl stepped forward, opening his briefcase. I have the original will here, properly notarized and witnessed, along with documentation of the forgery. I looked directly into Dad's eyes as I folded the letter. Mom's last words seemed to hang in the air between us. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from him. Dad's recovery was instant, like he'd rehearsed for this moment. That letter is clearly fabricated, he announced, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he'd perfected over decades as a high school principal. Claire has always been emotionally unstable. This is exactly the kind of attention-seeking behavior. I have the original will here, Carl interrupted, his calm voice cutting through Dad's performance. He pulled out a thick manila envelope and began laying documents on the table. Properly executed, witnessed, and notarized 3 months before Elaine's death. The color drained from Dad's face as Carl spread out the papers. I recognized Mom's signature immediately, the graceful loops I'd seen on countless permission slips and birthday cards throughout my childhood. That's impossible, Mason sputtered, pushing away from the fireplace. Dad said Mom changed everything right before. What your father presented, Carl continued steadily, was a forgery. I've already consulted with forensic document experts who can verify this. The signatures don't match, and the paper stock is wrong. He paused, adjusting his glasses. I have their preliminary findings here as well. A low murmur rippled through the room. I caught fragments of whispered conversations. Always seemed controlling. And poor Elaine. The tide of sympathy was shifting, and Dad knew it. His fingers drummed against the table, a nervous tell I hadn't seen since I was a kid. I can confirm every word of that letter. Aunt Lila's voice carried from the back of the room. She stood, her silver blonde hair catching the afternoon light. Elaine told me everything, about the canceled therapy sessions, the isolation, all of it. I have her text messages saved. Dad's head snapped toward her. You have no right. I have every right, Lila cut in. She was my sister, and you broke her heart trying to break her daughter's spirit. More voices joined in. Mom's old friend from church mentioned how Dad had turned her away at the door multiple times. A cousin recalled Mom crying at last year's Christmas dinner. Each revelation was another crack in Dad's carefully constructed facade. Carl cleared his throat. According to Elaine's authentic will, the entire estate, including the house, her personal effects, and all financial assets, passes directly to Claire. There are no provisions for Harold or Mason. The room erupted. Mason started shouting about family loyalty, while Dad's face twisted into something ugly and unfamiliar. A few relatives stood up, pointing fingers and raising voices. The noise swelled until I could barely think. This is preposterous, Dad slammed his hand on the table. I won't stand for— You don't have a choice, Carl said simply. The will is legally binding. Any attempt to contest it would only trigger a forensic investigation into the forged document you presented. He turned to face Dad directly. Do you really want that kind of scrutiny? The threat hung in the air like smoke. Dad's authority, the power he'd wielded over this family for decades, was crumbling in real time. I watched his eyes dart around the room, searching for allies, finding none. Even Mason had backed away, suddenly very interested in the pattern of the carpet. Without another word, Dad shoved his chair back and stormed toward the door. The heavy oak slammed behind him with enough force to rattle Mom's china in the cabinet. The same china he'd used as a bargaining chip just yesterday, promising it to Mason's wife. The room dissolved into chaos. Relatives clustered in corners, whispering and gesturing. Mason tried to approach me, probably to negotiate, but Aunt Lila stepped between us with a steel in her spine I'd never seen before. I stood there, Mom's letter still in my hands, watching decades of Dad's careful manipulation unravel in minutes. The truth had done what no amount of arguing ever could. It had exposed him completely. 2 days after the will reading, I was pulling weeds in Mom's garden when my phone buzzed. The late afternoon sun warmed my back as I tugged off my gardening gloves and checked the caller ID. Pastor Mitchell. My stomach tightened. I hadn't been to church since the funeral. "Claire," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I wanted you to hear this from me first. The board met this morning about your father." I sat back on my heels, fingers trailing through the soft earth Mom had tended for decades. The lavender she'd planted along the fence still bloomed, stubborn and sweet, just like her. We received multiple calls after what happened at the reading. He cleared his throat. Several board members expressed serious concerns about Harold's position as deacon. A butterfly drifted past. Yellow, Mom's favorite. Remember how she used to say they were nature's way of sending little notes? I smiled, thinking how she'd appreciate this moment. The forged will alone would have been grounds for review, Pastor Mitchell continued. But when we heard about him intercepting your mother's medical care, isolating her from friends, he paused. "Claire, that kind of spiritual and emotional abuse cannot be overlooked. Not from someone in church leadership." My free hand curled around a clump of soil. "What happened?" "We called an emergency meeting. Harold was less than forthcoming. When confronted with the evidence, he became defensive, even hostile. The board voted unanimously. He's been asked to resign his position, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like summer heat. 25 years of Dad's carefully cultivated authority in the church, gone. All those Sunday mornings of him straightening his tie, practicing his deacon face in the mirror, making sure we all knew the importance of his position, now reduced to nothing. "Claire, are you there?" "Yes," I said softly. "I'm here, in Mom's garden, actually." "Ah." His voice softened. "Elaine loved that garden. Said it was where she felt closest to God." A memory surfaced. Mom kneeling in this same spot, showing me how to tell the difference between flowers and weeds. "Sometimes," she'd said, "what looks like it doesn't belong is exactly what the garden needs." "The congregation should know by tomorrow," Pastor Mitchell added. "Though news travels fast in small towns, several families have already requested different deacons for their prayer circles." I could picture it. The whispers after service, the awkward silences when Dad walked past, the subtle shifting of loyalties. His carefully constructed image of the righteous family man crumbling like old brick. "Thank you for telling me," I managed. "Your mother was a light in our community, Claire. What happened to her?" "It shouldn't have. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner." After we hung up, I stayed in the garden, surrounded by the plants Mom had loved. The afternoon light filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the flower beds. Here, in this space she'd created, the silence felt different. Not like the suffocating quiet of family dinners, or the hollow echo of unanswered questions. This silence was alive with memory and meaning. A car door slammed next door. I glanced over to see Mrs. Henderson, who'd been on the church board for 30 years, walking briskly toward her house. She caught my eye and gave a firm nod, the kind that spoke volumes in small-town language. Word was spreading. I pulled my gloves back on and returned to the weeding. Mom had always said gardens needed constant tending, that you couldn't just plant something and expect it to thrive without care. She'd been talking about more than flowers, I realize now. She'd been teaching me about growth, about resilience, about the quiet power of nurturing what matters. The sound of another car made me look up. Dad's silver sedan rolled past slowly, his figure rigid behind the wheel. He didn't turn his head, but I knew he saw me there, kneeling in Mom's garden. For the first time since I could remember, his presence didn't make me shrink. I stayed exactly where I was, my hands in the soil my mother had loved, as he drove away from the life he'd tried so hard to control. Mason wouldn't even look at me as he hauled the last of his boxes down the front steps. His shoulders were hunched, defensive, like a kid caught in a lie. Which I suppose was exactly what had happened. You know that feeling when someone's been caught red-handed, but they're still trying to act like they're the wronged party? That was Mason, through and through. "Need any help?" I called from the porch, more out of habit than actual concern. He just grunted and shoved the box roughly into his trunk. The cardboard split at one corner. I recognized Mom's old photo album spilling out. My throat tightened. Those weren't his to take. Those stay, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. They're part of the estate. Whatever. He dumped the box on the lawn, scattering loose photos across the grass. Real mature, little brother. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner, before collecting the memories he'd tried to steal. One photo caught my eye. Mom at her piano, head thrown back in laughter while I, maybe 7 years old, plunked away at the keys. The sunlight through the window had caught her just right, making her look almost luminous. God, I missed her laugh. Remember those summer evenings when she'd play after dinner? The notes would drift through the house like a breeze, making even Dad's stern silence feel a little lighter. She never played when he was home after the incident, though. Funny how clear those details become when you finally understand the whole picture. The house felt different now, like it was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I walked through each room, trailing my fingers along the walls. The formal living room where Dad had held his prayer group meetings, now just an empty space waiting to be reimagined. The dining room where he'd lectured us about appearance and reputation, its heavy curtains already packed away, letting in actual sunlight. Up in their bedroom, Dad's closet stood open and bare. He'd cleared it out yesterday while I was at the lawyer's office. Probably couldn't stand the humiliation of doing it while I was home. His precious suits and polished shoes, the physical armor of his authority, all gone. Only the empty hangers remained, swaying slightly in the air conditioning. "You can't hide behind your collar anymore, Dad," I whispered to the empty space. The afternoon light slanted through the windows as I made my way downstairs. Most of the furniture would go to auction, the heavy antiques Dad had insisted on, the proper decorations that had made this house feel more like a museum than a home. But there, in the corner of the living room, stood Mom's piano. Her refuge, her joy. The movers were coming for it tomorrow morning. Not to sell it. No, this one piece of her was coming home with me. I sat on the bench, my fingers finding the keys without thought. The middle C still stuck a little, just like always. Mom used to joke it was the piano's way of making sure we paid attention. A car door slammed outside, and I tensed instinctively. But it was just Mrs. Henderson next door, watering her roses. She caught my eye through the window and gave me that same firm nod from yesterday. In small-town language, that nod said everything. We know the truth now. We're watching. He can't hurt you anymore. I pulled out my phone and checked the mover's confirmation one more time. 9 a.m. sharp, the text read. Piano transport specialists. Mom would have appreciated that. She always said instruments needed to be handled with respect. The house creaked and settled around me, its shadows growing longer as evening approached. From the kitchen came the familiar tick-tick-tick of the old wall clock, the only sound in a house that had once been so carefully controlled. Dad's rules about noise. No running, no loud laughing, no music without permission. Now the silence felt like freedom rather than constraint. I played a few notes of Mom's favorite piece, just the opening bars of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The sound filled the empty rooms, bouncing off bare walls and floating up the stairs. No one to shush me, no one to criticize the tempo or complain about the timing. Tomorrow this piano would sit in my living room where music could flow freely, where Mom's memory could live on without fear or restriction, where every note would be a reminder that sometimes justice comes not in grand gestures, but in quiet reclamations. Mason's last box still sat in the driveway, abandoned like his claims to the house. I should probably bring it in before dark. But for now, I let my fingers dance across the keys, playing the melody Mom had taught me all those years ago. The stuck middle C made me smile. 3 weeks later, I sat in my apartment watching the late afternoon sun paint stripes across Mom's piano. The movers had positioned it exactly where I wanted, centered against the living room wall, its rich mahogany catching the light just so. You know that moment when something finally feels right? When all the pieces click into place? That's what this was. My fingers traced the familiar grain of the wood, remembering how Mom used to dust it every Sunday morning before playing. The routine was sacred to her. Gentle strokes with the soft cloth, checking each key's response, adjusting the bench just so. Little rituals that meant everything. You'd love this spot, Mom, I whispered, settling onto the bench. The middle C still stuck slightly. We'd never fixed it, and now I never would. Some imperfections deserve to stay exactly as they are. They tell their own stories. Behind me, mounted in a simple frame, hung Mom's letter. I'd chosen to display it where I could see it from the piano, her handwriting flowing across the page like musical notes. Sometimes when I played, I swore I could hear her voice in the words, "You are my daughter," my favorite piece of music. My hands found their position on the keys. The opening notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata filled the room, her favorite piece, the one she'd taught me when I was 12. Back then, my fingers had stumbled over the complex patterns. Now they moved with certainty, muscle memory deeper than thought. Aunt Lila had called yesterday with an update. Dad had moved 3 towns over, renting a small apartment near the interstate. The church board's decision had hit him hard. No more deacon's collar to hide behind. No more respectful nods from neighbors who once hung on his every word. Mason wasn't speaking to him either. Funny how quickly power structures crumble when the foundation proves false. The music swelled as I reached the middle section. A neighbor's dog barked somewhere below, and a siren wailed in the distance. City sounds, so different from the enforced quiet of my childhood home. Here, life happened without permission or apology. I thought about the last time I'd seen Dad, watching from his car as the movers loaded the piano. He'd aged decades in those few days, his shoulders hunched under the weight of exposed truth. Part of me had expected to feel guilty, seeing him brought so low. But all I felt was peace. The kind that comes from justice served not in anger, but in quiet revelation. The sunlight shifted, catching the glass over Mom's letter. Her words seemed to glow. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from him, but she had protected me, not in life, perhaps, but in death. She'd left me the truth, trusted me to find it, to understand it, to use it not for revenge, but for restoration." The final notes of the sonata hung in the air. I let them fade naturally, just as she'd taught me. No rushing, no forcing, let the music find its own end. Through the window, I could see the city stretching away toward the horizon, full of possibilities that once seemed out of reach. Mom's voice had been buried but never truly silenced. Her letter had done more than expose Dad's lies. It had given me back my own story, my own worth. He'd lost everything he'd used to control others. His position, his reputation, his power over our family's narrative. And I'd gained exactly what he'd tried to take from me. Clarity, justice, and finally, peace. My fingers found the keys again, ready to start the piece over. But this time, when I hit that sticky middle C, I smiled. Some notes aren't meant to be perfect. They're meant to be true. He silenced her in life. I made sure she spoke in death. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.